The world is quiet now. Your eyes are heavy. And somewhere, across the river of time, a boy looks up at a clock tower. It is dusk in Ulm, a town wrapped in the soft blue fog of southern Germany. The year is 1879. The streets are cobbled and cool. Horses pull wooden carts past lanterns that flicker in the wind. Church bells toll from high towers. A canal reflects the fading light of the sun, bending it gently in ripples of gold and violet. Inside a narrow apartment above a shop, a newborn has just arrived. The walls are still. The air smells faintly of polished wood and soot. His name is Albert Einstein. No crowds gathered, no prophecies made. No one yet knows that this fragile infant, soft-haired, quiet and thoughtful, will one day bend time itself. But the wind seems to pause just a moment longer at the window, as if it knows. Albert was not like the other children. He spoke late, so late, in fact, that his parents feared something was wrong. For years, he would repeat his own words under his breath, as if turning them over in his mind before releasing them to the world. Even then, his voice was quiet, his eyes more so. He watched, he listened, he did not rush. The world, for Albert, seemed slower. In Munich, where the family moved when Albert was a toddler, the days were thick with smoke and soot. The family business, electrical engineering, hummed with copper wires and glass bulbs. His father and uncle spoke of dynamos, of voltage, of magnetic fields, but little Albert was drawn not to noise, but to silence, not to spark, but to mystery. One day, his father gave him a compass, a simple brass instrument in a wooden box. But the needle, it moved without touch. It trembled, it pointed, it obeyed a force unseen. Albert stared. He stared for hours. Why did it move? What was this invisible hand? Something deeply hidden had to be behind things, he would later say. The needle's twitch, so small and silent, pulled open a lifetime of questions. Imagine Albert at 6 years old. It is winter. A layer of snow blankets the courtyard. Inside a fire crackles, and somewhere a violin sings softly. Albert sits cross-legged on the floor, his hand wrapped around a string-bound book. He is reading about light, not just what it is, but what it means, how it travels, how it behaves, how it might hold the secret to everything. His family thought he was strange, not broken, but different. He rarely played rough. He preferred quiet games. He memorized entire books, not to boast, but to ponder. He loved patterns, symmetry, order. But above all, he loved questions. The years pass. The city grows louder. And Albert, ever the wanderer of thought, is sent to school. But here, the world tightens. The schools are strict. The teachers demand obedience. Answers must be memorized, not imagined. Albert shrinks from it. He asks questions his instructors can't or won't answer. He challenges their conclusions. He is not defiant, just curious, always curious. They call him lazy, rebellious, a dreamer. But inside something stirs, like a distant storm behind the stars, something vast and waiting. Now picture a train. Its engine exhales steam into the cool dusk. Albert is older now, perhaps 16. He presses his forehead to the window pane. Outside, telephone poles whip past in blur. The sky is orange and blue. And then, the thought arrives. Quiet, gentle, like mist. What would it feel like to ride alongside a beam of light? To keep pace with it? To follow it to the ends of the universe? It's not a child's question. It's the question. The one that would one day give rise to special relativity. But for now, it is just a wandering, a whisper, a dream stitched into the hum of wheels on steel. Back home, Albert's family faces hardship. The business fails. His parents move to Italy. Albert is left behind in Munich. He's lonely, angry, isolated. Eventually, he runs away, from school and country both, choosing freedom over rigid obedience. He reunites with his family and continues his studies in Switzerland. There, life is quieter, gentler. The mountains rise like sleeping giants. The lakes reflect the sky with perfect clarity. Albert studies physics and mathematics, but not for grades, for wonder, for truth. He is still poor, still often overlooked, but his mind is beginning to orbit something vast. And now, imagine this. Albert is in his 20s. He has no doctorate, no university post. He works in a patent office in Bern, reviewing inventions all day long. But at night, the world unfolds. Stacks of paper give way to equations scribbled on napkins. Filing cabinets become blackboards in his mind. The ticking clock is a metronome for thought. He dreams of time, of moving trains and distant stars, of clocks on towers and beams of light caught in motion. This is where the future is born, not in a lab, but in a quiet office above a sleepy city, where a man with a mustache and a far-off gaze asks the universe to tell him its secrets, and the universe begins to whisper back. Before the flash of fame, before the chalkboard equations that bent the universe, there was a small, quiet room in Bern, and a man who was learning to live inside his own mind. Albert Einstein, at 22, was not yet a professor, not a celebrity, not even taken seriously by many of his peers. He had no doctorate, no published papers, no lab coat or classroom to call his own. What he had was a desk at the Swiss patent office, and a mind so wide and so quiet that most couldn't hear it when it spoke. The building itself was unremarkable. 3 floors, white walls, thick wooden doors. On sunny days, the light filtered in through dusty panes and made golden patterns on the floor. Albert sat near the back, reviewing patent applications for devices he didn't invent, ideas he didn't ask for. Electric motors, mechanical clocks, telescoping toothbrushes. Once, a typewriter for the blind. Each morning, he'd arrive just before the hour, sometimes carrying a roll or a crumpled apple. Hair uncombed, shirt untucked. He was friendly but distant, polite but preoccupied. He would nod to the receptionist, smile softly at the typist, then disappear into a quiet rhythm of thought and paper. The work was easy for him, too easy. And so, as the others worked at their normal pace, Einstein began to drift. He would close his eyes sometimes, and in his imagination, a scene would unfold. A man on a train, a lightning bolt, 2 observers watching from different places. Was the event the same for both? Or did the universe have a different answer for each? In another moment, he would imagine himself riding on a beam of light. Would the world stop moving around him? Would the wave freeze? Would clock still tick? Would time itself stop? These were not questions for fun. They were maps. Maps of a world that did not yet exist. A world of curved space and layered time. And Einstein was its quiet traveler. He was often seen staring out the window, his gaze fixed somewhere between the rooftops and the sky. Not bored, just listening, waiting for the thought to finish. He took long walks through the streets of Bern. The bells of the Zicklogger Tower echoed overhead. His footsteps matched their rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. He watched carriages roll across cobblestones. Children play by fountains. The sun shift across shutters. The world moved, but he wondered, did it move the same for everyone? At home, things were not always peaceful. He had married Mileva Maric, a brilliant physicist in her own right. They had met as students, drawn together by a shared curiosity and quiet ambition. But now, life was heavier. Their first daughter, Liesel, had been born in secret, then vanished from the records. A son followed. Bills followed. Distance followed. Einstein loved deeply, but imperfectly. He was devoted to thought, sometimes more than people. The strain grew. He would pace the small apartment, muttering formulas aloud, while Mileva tended to the children or sat silently by the window. And yet, through the quiet chaos, he kept thinking. He kept a notebook in his pocket, scribbling ideas between errands, sometimes at the dinner table, sometimes in the bath. He would pause mid-conversation, lost in a calculation. He spoke often about simplicity. Everything should be made as simple as possible, he once said, but not simpler. He believed the universe spoke in patterns, not easy ones, but elegant ones. And so he searched for them, softly, steadily. He was not fast, but he was patient. He called this quality his only real talent, staying with the problem longer. His desk in the patent office became his observatory, not of stars, but of time itself. From that small wooden chair, he wandered further than any ship or balloon had ever gone. He wandered into the nature of simultaneity, of reference frames, of light's unchanging speed, and all the while the world passed him by. His applications for academic posts were rejected. His theories, still unformed, were unheard. No one yet knew the clock was ticking toward a moment that would rewrite the laws of the cosmos. But Einstein felt it, somewhere just behind the veil, a shape forming, a truth waiting. He did not force it. He let it arrive, like light through the window. And when it did, it would come not in thunder, but in paper, ink, equations. A quiet revolution written with a fountain pen in the back room of a patent office. Outside the patent office, the bells of Bern mark another passing hour. Inside, time begins to dissolve. It is 1905. Albert Einstein is 26 years old. His desk is cluttered. The sun filters through striped blinds. The hum of streetcars fades into silence. Each day, he stamps applications, checks diagrams, files inventions he didn't invent. But within him, the world is stirring. This year, this single year, would become known in science as the Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year. First, he writes a paper about light, not just how it moves, but how it behaves like something more, not just a wave, but a particle too, a bundle, a quanta. He names it the photon. What if light itself is made of little packets of energy? He asks. What if light comes in pieces, in sparks? It is radical. It is heresy. It will eventually help launch quantum theory. But for now, no one notices. Then, another paper. This time, on motion. Imagine a speck of dust floating in water. It jiggles. It dances. Not from currents, but from something unseen. Einstein explains it. Atoms. Tiny, invisible collisions. The math proves something many still doubt. That atoms are real, tangible, countable. That the universe is built not from air or fire, but from particles too small for the eye to see. And still, no one notices. Then, the third paper, this time on time itself. What if, he asks, there is no such thing as universal time at all? A train moves, a person watches. A flash of lightning splits the sky. To the observer, the lightning arrives in one moment, but to the person on the train, it arrives in another. Time is not absolute. It changes depending on speed, on movement, on position. Special relativity is born. The idea that time and space are woven together like a fabric. a fabric that bends, a fabric that moves. And then, the fourth, the shortest, the most powerful, a tiny formula with enormous weight. E equals mc, squared energy equals mass, times the speed of light squared. In other words, mass is energy, energy is mass. Even the smallest thing, a grain of sand, holds the potential for vast, unimaginable power. The implications are terrifying, but the math is beautiful. Albert writes these papers alone. No laboratory, no university, no assistant, no funding, no title. Just a pen, a desk, and a mind that won't stop asking. The papers are published. And this time, the world begins to stir. The sleeping universe is starting to listen. Suddenly, professors take notice. Scientists whisper his name. A young part-time clerk becomes something else. A rising light in the world of physics. Einstein receives a PhD, then invitations, lectures, awards. He leaves the patent office behind, but he never leaves the wonder. Now imagine Albert again, older now. He walks through Zurich with his notebook tucked under his arm. The lake sparkles. The streets are lined with cafes and conversations. But his eyes are far away. He is thinking again. And this time, his thoughts are not just about movement through space, but about space itself. How it curves, how it stretches, how it bends in the presence of mass. A few years later, in 1915, Einstein stands before a chalkboard in Berlin. He is surrounded by silence. Weeks have passed without sleep. His fingers are stained with ink. The math has fought him. But at last, he finishes his general theory of relativity. The idea is simple, but breathtaking. Gravity is not a force. It is the curving of space and time around mass. Planets don't orbit because they're pulled. They orbit because space bends, and they follow the bend. It is the universe, folding in on itself. He writes the equations, elegant, dense, and strange. The predictions are bold. They say light will bend when it passes near a massive object. They say time itself will slow. Many doubt him. Until, in 1919, during a solar eclipse, British astronomer Arthur Eddington observed starlight bending around the sun. Just as Einstein predicted, it is a moment of quiet, mathematical poetry. A beam of light gently curving through the darkness. The newspapers roar. Revolution in science. Lights all askew in the heavens. Einstein becomes famous. A reluctant celebrity. He's asked to speak, photographed, quoted, celebrated. But he does not seek attention. He writes to a friend, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." Behind the flashbulbs, he remains the quiet boy with the compass. The young man on the train, the dreamer in the patent office. He spends his nights lost in equations, his mornings walking slowly to work, his hair wild, his socks mismatched. Fame brushes against him, but he moves past it. Einstein's ideas continue to reshape physics. He questions quantum mechanics, though he respects it. He seeks deeper truth, a unified theory, a single framework that ties all forces together. The answers elude him, but he never stops searching. And all the while, the world changes. Newspapers carry his name. Children recognize his face. Cartoons mock his hair. And yet, in a quiet room in Princeton, Albert sits once more at a desk, a pen in hand, a stack of paper before him. The room is filled with the sound of ticking. And still, he dreams. The world turned its gaze toward him, and he did not know quite where to look. After the eclipse of 1919 proved his theory, Einstein's name circled the globe like a comet. He had not asked for it. He had not expected it. But suddenly, he was no longer a quiet physicist. He was a symbol. Newspapers declared him the new Newton, the man who bent the heavens, the thinker who redefined time. His photograph appeared on front pages, beside monarchs and generals. His equation was printed on buttons and broadsheets. Reporters followed him to cafes. Strangers sent letters. Children whispered his name in schoolyards. But to Einstein, the experience was disorienting, even alien. "With fame, I become more and more stupid," he joked in a letter to a friend, which of course is a very common phenomenon. He did not wear fame well. He preferred wool sweaters to suits. He spoke slowly, with long pauses, sometimes forgetting his own schedule entirely. He disliked crowds. He distrusted flattery. He once said, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease." And yet, he understood the need for symbols. He knew the public craved figures who represented ideas bigger than themselves. He became one, almost by accident. To some, he was the gentle genius. To others, a secular prophet. To others still, a threat, a radical with foreign ideas. He smiled when expected. He bowed when required. But in private, he remained the same. A solitary traveller, drifting through thoughts others hadn't yet dared to follow. During this period, Einstein travelled often to give lectures, receive awards, meet with scientists and philosophers. But everywhere he went, the noise followed. Cameras, interviews, requests for endorsements, speculation about his views on God, government, genius, and the soul. It was as though the world had mistaken his mind for a mirror, hoping to find their own answers reflected in it. He often He once said that he often thought in music. He would daydream of melodies that looped gently in his mind until a new idea appeared, not as a sentence, but as a feeling. Einstein also began to speak more openly about imagination. To many, science was about facts, about rigid certainty. But to Einstein, it was a symphony of questions. "Imagination is more important than knowledge," he said. "For knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world." He spoke too about God, but not in the way the world wanted him to. He rejected the image of a bearded figure in the sky, pulling strings and judging souls. Instead, he said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists." To Einstein, the divine was found in structure, in the quiet elegance of nature's logic, in the laws that govern stars and atoms alike. He called it cosmic religion, not faith, but reverence, a humility before the mystery of it all. But fame, of course, did not only bring reverence, it brought pressure. Governments courted him, institutions competed for him, ideologues twisted his words, anti-Semites used his origins against him, political leaders quoted him selectively. Einstein belonged to no nation, yet every nation seemed to claim him. He once wrote, "Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind." The more the world wanted from him, the more he pulled back. He became more private, more selective in whom he spoke to. He began walking alone for hours at a time, staring at trees, at water, at falling leaves. He had close friends. Most famously, fellow physicist Niels Bohr. Their debates about quantum mechanics were legendary. Einstein could not accept the randomness at the heart of the quantum world. God does not play dice with the universe, he said again and again. Bohr would reply, Einstein, stop telling God what to do. They respected one another deeply, but Einstein remained unconvinced. His world was one of cause and effect, not chaos and chance. He preferred the comfort of the clockmaker, not the jester. Despite it all, he remained gentle, never bitter, only puzzled at times by the world's obsession with genius. He insisted he was no genius at all. It's not that I'm so smart, he said. It's just that I stay with problems longer. He saw himself as a student, not a sage. He told young people to follow wonder, not fame. He told dreamers to keep dreaming, even when no one believed them, especially then. And in the quiet, in the margins between applause and letters and interviews, he would return again and again to his notebook, still searching, still listening, still hoping that behind the equations, behind the patterns, the universe would reveal just a little more. The stars have shifted overhead. The world is no longer the same. It is the 1930s now. The streets of Berlin echo with louder voices. Flags ripple in the wind, sharp red, black and white. A chill settles over the city, though winter has not arrived. Einstein watches from his study window. Not just the weather, but the feeling, a heaviness, a gathering storm. He is no longer just a physicist. His name has become a symbol, and to some, a threat. His theories are called Jewish science. His pacifism, his open criticism of nationalism, make him a target. The whisper becomes a roar. He leaves Germany, not with fanfare, but with caution. He boards a steamer. He does not return. Behind him, Europe begins to darken. Before him, a new chapter unfolds. Einstein arrives in America, not as a conqueror, not as a politician, but as a man with a suitcase and a brilliant, weary mind. He finds a home in Princeton, New Jersey, a small university town with leafy streets and quiet sidewalks. It is here that he will live for the rest of his life. It is here that his thoughts will turn inward, not just to the stars, but to humanity itself. At Princeton, Einstein keeps to a modest routine. He walks to campus every morning, carrying a violin or a notepad. He speaks rarely at length. He writes, he reads, he plays music by lamplight. He rarely wears socks. The neighbors wave politely. He waves back. But he is often far away. The world, however, does not leave him alone. For even as he tries to solve the universe begins to tear itself apart. In 1939, a letter arrives. It is urgent, grim. It comes from physicist Leo Szilard. The message is clear. Germany may be building a weapon, one based on Einstein's own equation. E equals mc squared, the energy of mass. If harnessed, if released, it could flatten cities. Szilard urges Einstein to act, not to build a bomb, but to warn. Einstein hesitates. He does not believe in violence. He abhors war. But he understands what's at stake. And so, reluctantly, he signs the letter. A warning to President Roosevelt. A letter that helps launch the Manhattan Project. Einstein never works on the bomb itself. He's kept away from the project. He's considered a security risk because of his pacifist beliefs. But the knowledge weighs on him. I made one great mistake in my life, he later writes. When I signed the letter to President Roosevelt, the bomb is tested. The desert sky turns white. Then Hiroshima. Then Nagasaki. Einstein hears the news in his quiet study. He closes the newspaper. He does not speak for hours. The world had split the atom. and in doing so, had split its soul. After the war, Einstein becomes an outspoken advocate for peace. He supports nuclear disarmament. He pleads with leaders to come together, not to dominate, but to cooperate. He meets with world leaders. He signs petitions. He speaks not as a scientist, but as a citizen of Earth. And still, he wonders. He wonders what responsibility a scientist holds for how their ideas are used, whether knowledge should be pursued for its own sake, or weighed against its consequences. He never finds a perfect answer, but he never stops asking. In private, he remains curious, gentle, quiet. He reads ancient philosophy and modern poetry. He listens to Bach and Mozart, often closing his eyes while he plays. "If I were not a physicist," he once said, "I would probably be a musician." For Einstein, music and mathematics shared a sacred rhythm. Both were languages, both were mysteries. Both offered glimpses into the infinite. He receives letters from children, from students, from strangers. Some ask him to explain the universe. Others ask about love, about fear, about dreams. He replies to many of them, always kindly, sometimes with jokes, often with truth. He refuses to be put on a pedestal. He jokes that fame is like wearing an old suit that doesn't fit. He is offered positions of power, even the presidency of Israel. He declines them all. Politics is for the moment, he says. An equation is for eternity. But even as the world hails him a genius, Einstein sees himself differently. He calls himself a solitary traveler, one who is never quite at home anywhere, a man who belonged more to ideas than to places, and yet he always hoped that understanding might bring people together, that wonder might soften fear, that the mysteries of the universe might remind us how small and precious we are. The years pass. His walk slows. His hair whitens. His voice grows softer. But his mind still hums, still dreams. In the margins of his papers, he scribbles new theories, equations that dance between gravity and light. He continues to chase the unified field theory, a grand explanation that would connect all forces. He never finds it, but the search was its own reward. One night, near the end of his life, a visitor finds Einstein staring at the stars through a frosted window. He says nothing. He simply nods toward the sky. "The most beautiful thing we can experience," he later writes, "is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science." The war was over, but the questions had only begun. The bombs had fallen, the sky had turned white, and the world, for a moment, held its breath. But Albert Einstein, he did not cheer. He did not celebrate victory. He sat quietly in his home in Princeton, head bowed, eyes closed. A letter had become a bomb. An idea had become a weapon. And the man who had only ever searched for beauty and truth now found himself caught in a shadow he did not cast. Einstein spent much of his remaining life not in equation, but in reflection. He spoke of peace, of restraint, of the dangers of unchecked knowledge. He called for an end to nuclear weapons. He signed letters. He gave interviews. "We have to learn to think in a new way," he said. "We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive." He became a voice of conscience, not only in science, but in society. He saw the world's wounds, its wars, its racism, its hunger for control, and he did not look away. In 1946, speaking at Lincoln University, Einstein called racism in America a disease of white people. He had seen anti-Semitism in Germany, and he saw its echo in the treatment of black Americans. He became a friend and supporter of Paul Robeson, the actor, singer, and activist. He joined the NAACP. He publicly defended W.E.B. Du Bois when others remained silent. He did not shout. He simply stood, as he always had, where his conscience told him to. He also wrote to Bertrand Russell, Sigmund Freud, and Marie Curie, whom he admired deeply. When Curie was criticized in the press, he wrote to her privately, "Don't read that junk. You belong to those rare spirits who remain upright and pure in a world that is not." Einstein valued friendship, but he preferred those who lived simply. He spoke with poets, monks, musicians. He corresponded with Rabindranath Tagore, the Indian mystic and Nobel laureate. Together, they debated science and spirituality. Einstein sought logic, Tagore, beauty, and in between, they found harmony. The unity of nature, Einstein once said, is a rational conception, but perhaps it is also a poem. He distrusted power. He criticized governments, especially his own, when they strayed from reason. He opposed McCarthyism. He refused to testify against others. He called for freedom of thought above all else. Laws alone cannot secure freedom of expression, he said. For every man who values liberty must guard it carefully in his own mind. He was offered honors, medals, streets, buildings, even the presidency of Israel. He declined. "I have neither the natural ability nor the experience," he wrote gently. "I am a man of letters, nothing more." He called himself a passionate pacifist, though not naive. He understood the world's violence, but he believed in the quiet revolution of thought, of conscience, of listening. In a later essay he wrote, "A human being is a part of a whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us. Our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circle of compassion." He was an outsider all his life. In Germany, he was too Jewish. In America, too foreign. In politics, too quiet. In science, too poetic. But he never wanted to belong. He only wanted to understand. In Princeton, he would walk alone in the early morning. He would nod at passers-by. Sometimes a child would wave. He would wave back with a soft smile, not as a hero, not as a genius, just as Albert, a man with a wild head of hair, a slow gait, and eyes that still dreamed. His chalkboards filled with equations, but his journals with reflections. He asked what it meant to be good, to be just, to be humble in the face of all that remains unknown. He once wrote, "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science." And so, he spent his final years not as a conqueror of knowledge, but as a caretaker of wonder, not racing toward an answer, but returning again and again to the question, what does it mean to be human in a vast and infinite world? The seasons shift once more. The leaves in Princeton turn gold, then fall. And in a modest home on Mercer Street, an old man stirs beneath a quilt of notebooks and dreams. Albert Einstein is older now. The world around him has changed many times. Wars have ended. Others have begun. Nations rise. Cities pulse with neon and speed. But within these quiet walls, time still moves slowly, as it always did for him. His routine is simple. He walks when the weather is kind. He writes in the mornings, rests in the afternoons. He speaks with visitors in the evening, if he feels up to it. Sometimes he hums softly to himself. Sometimes he just sits, gazing out the window, as if waiting for the universe to whisper again. In his final years, the questions never stop. He still puzzles over gravity and electromagnetism, why they behave as they do, He still sketches lines and spirals across pages, seeking that elusive pattern that will connect everything. Not for fame, not for prizes, but because he must. Because even in the quietest hour of night, a question burns brighter than any answer. His health begins to fade. His body, once so full of restless walks and flowing violin, now tires easily. But his spirit, his curiosity, remains as vast as the stars. He receives visitors from all over the world, scientists, philosophers, journalists, children, musicians, teachers. They come hoping for wisdom, for a glimpse of the genius behind the myth. But what they often find is a gentle man who speaks softly, with mischief in his smile and kindness in his gaze. He dislikes formality. He does not wear a tie. He often forgets to brush his hair. He speaks in riddles and metaphors, sometimes pausing mid-sentence, as if listening to a thought only he can hear. In one letter, he writes, "Try not to become a man of success. Rather, become a man of value." In another, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." He reflects often on peace, on human rights, on the responsibility of knowledge. Though once skeptical of religion, he speaks now of wonder, of mystery, not in dogma, but in reverence for the unknown. He calls it cosmic religion, a feeling of awe too deep for words. As the end draws near, he refuses surgery to extend his life. He does not fear death. He writes a few final notes, unfinished equations, symbols that trail off as if floating away into silence. On April 18th, 1955, Albert Einstein passes away. The hospital room is quiet. A nurse closes the window. The Princeton morning is grey and soft. His ashes are scattered in secret, his grave unmarked by request. "I want to be cremated," he once said, "so that people will not come to worship bones." And yet, Einstein is not gone. Not truly. His mind lives on in the bending of starlight, in the ticking of satellites, in the whisper of equations written on blackboards across the world. But perhaps his greatest legacy is not in physics, nor in fame. It is in the child who looks up at the night sky and wonders. It is in the student who dares to question, in the artist who paints what cannot be seen, in the dreamer who asks not what is, but what might be. Albert Einstein gave the world more than theory. He gave it permission to wonder, to slow down, to listen, to imagine light not as a beam, but as a pathway. The boy who stared at a compass, who rode alongside a beam of light in his thoughts, who walked alone through cities of noise and war, became a beacon, a quiet one, a flickering one, but bright enough to change the shape of space itself. So now, dear listener, as the clock ticks onward and the world hums gently beneath your rest, close your eyes. Let the stars wheel slowly overhead. Let the fabric of time stretch just a little wider. And imagine, somewhere in the soft folds of the cosmos, the dream of Albert Einstein still echoes, still riding the light, still whispering questions into the void, still waiting for you to ask the next one. The stars have wheeled overhead, the clocks have quieted, and the questions drift gently now, like dust in twilight. You've walked tonight through the dreams of a mind unlike any other. Not a conqueror, not a king, but a boy with a compass, a man with a question, a soul who believed that truth was worth chasing, even when it could never be caught. Albert Einstein did not invent peace. He did not stop time. He did not master the world. He merely noticed it more closely. He paused where others rushed. He asked what others dared not. And when answers didn't come, he waited and wondered. In his final days, he wrote no final manifesto, no grand farewell, just equations, just thoughts. And in this way, his story never really ended. Perhaps you've had a thought like his once. Maybe, as a child, you stared at a fan blade spinning and wondered where the edge went, or lay in bed watching the ceiling slowly fade into shadow, wondering how time could feel so slow and yet disappear so quickly. Einstein never stopped asking those questions. He turned them over like stones in his pocket, carried them with him through war and fame, through exile and quiet halls. He held them up to the light, not to tame them, but to see what they revealed. He lived in a world of contradiction. He gave us the tools to split the atom, but warned us never to split ourselves. He unlocked the mysteries of time, but reminded us to be patient. Reality is merely an illusion, he said once. Albert, a very persistent one. And so, as you rest now, with the rhythm of your own thoughts beginning to slow, breathe gently. Let your mind wander. Let it drift, just as his did, across unseen galaxies and quiet country lanes. You are safe here. Let the weight of curiosity comfort you. Let the vastness of the unknown remind you. You don't have to understand everything. Some questions are meant to float. Some dreams are meant to stay unspoken. And some minds, like Einstein's, are meant to flicker like candlelight, soft, patient, eternal. The train hums in the distance. A clock ticks in another room. The stars blink and shift and spin. You are part of this rhythm now. You too are riding alongside the light. Sleep well, and when you wake, may you wonder again.